final TalkBack. I hope some of you have attended the ones that precede today. I think they've been wonderful, and today will be the culmination. I'm very excited about this TalkBack on cinematic literature. And to moderate this, I turned to my colleague at another festival in town, you may have heard of, at the, our guests, Matías Piñeiro, who's very known for his creative adaptations of Shakespeare plays. James Ivory, adaptations of literature, including, and you'll hear a little bit more about that, his second feature, Shakespeare Viola. And I know that a very likely upcoming production by Jim Ivory will be an adaptation that he has in the works of Richard II. Bill, who is the, Bill Rauch, the artistic director at the Oregon Shakespeare Festival, you created the most impressive moving adaptation last year for me. Your adaptation of Richard II just blew me away. And so I'm really honored and thrilled that he's here to moderate this event. So I'll turn things over to Bill Rauch.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. It's great to see so many of you out on a Sunday morning. And yeah, this is a great honor, thank you, to be able to be with you all and to share a table with two artists that I have such deep, deep admiration for. It's very exciting. And I've got some questions that I want to ask, and we'll just kind of let the conversation flow. And we want to make sure that there's plenty of time at the end for your questions and your comments as well. So I'm going to dive in and ask a few of you, Matías. You call your films profanations rather than adaptations of Shakespeare. What do you mean by that?
Because they're not adaptations at all. If you go to see the films waiting that approach, the films go very much in a very different direction. I'm very much interested in Shakespeare, but I'm taking some elements from it, from the plays, and I'm producing my own stories. And sometimes I arrive to Shakespeare through reading Shakespeare, not from making Shakespeare. I'm not someone that is connected to theater in my own experience. I don't have a theater background. So it's the text with which, almost as if it would be as an object. No? And that's why in the films it appear, the books appear so much. I have like this sort of fetish in a way. And from it, and so from the play I take materials. It's the clay from which I produce my own elements, but then I divert from the main source. So for me, it's very important to somehow make a point in this differentiation between adaptations. And profanations is a provocation in a way.
I think you were doing exactly what Shakespeare himself was doing.
It's very true. Yes. You said that you don't come from a theater background, but I know from our earlier conversations that you have directed one stage play, and it would be great for you to tell everybody about that.
Of course, and it's very important for the films that I kept on making. I did in 2010 a medium feature that is Rosalinda, because I was hooked by As You Like It. I couldn't believe As You Like It. I was absolutely taken by, and I am taken by that play, and especially with the character of Rosalinda, that I felt that there was a strong connection with one of the actresses that I tend to work with. I work with the same group of people. It's been like more than 10 years that I work once and again with the same people, and so I thought that Maria Villar would be a sort of photogenic pleasure of seeing Maria handling Rosalinda. No? And so I thought that film. And after I did that film, from the Universidad de Buenos Aires, the University of Buenos Aires, from the cultural center of the university, they asked me to participate in a cycle that is called Óperas Primas, where they call artists from other disciplines to make their first play. So I said yes. I thought that it was interesting. I have a very strong connection with my actors, that they do have a big theater tradition, and I follow their work and their rehearsals and their lifestyle and everything. So I have a strong theater connection in that personal way. And then I started thinking the play, and I decided to do a pasticcio. So I merged 5 comedies. I realized that I was interested in the comedies.
Why? Why the comedy?
Because of the women. Because of course that there's a lot. Of course there's like amazing women in the tragedies, but I connected the people that I work with, the actresses that I work with the female roles in the comedies that have intelligent women. No, and it's not that in the tragedies it's not that they're not intelligent, but they cannot control their intelligence. No, and that's why they are suicidal and they're murderers. No, they are beyond. No, so I want to see women that are intelligent. That and Rosalinda is that they are in control of that.
Fantastic. Fantastic. My brain is going through the whole canon right now, thinking about gender in every genre. It's fantastic. So Jim, let's talk a little bit about Shakespeare Walla, and if you can give us some context. I think we're going to get to see a little clip this morning, but it would be great to, I'm curious about how it came to be, and maybe how you think it sets the stage for all that has come since.
Okay. Well, Shakespeare Walla, you may not, a lot of you probably don't know it. I started my film career, at least the feature film part of it, well, more than that, in fact, in India. And while I was there, making The Householder, which was my first feature, I came in contact with Shashi Kapoor, who was the star of The Householder, who was the younger brother of a kind of a trilogy. Well, it was a great acting family, the Kapoor family. Raj Kapoor, Shami Kapoor, the father, Prithvi Raj Kapoor, was a great Indian star, both on stage and in films. And so I met Shashi Kapoor and his wife Jennifer, who was English, and her sister Felicity, and they were all in India, and her parents, and they had a Shakespearean traveling company. They had come from England in the 40s, the late 40s, right after Indian independence, and they got together a group of Shakespearean actors, all English, and to which they added some Indian actors. And they traveled around India performing a number of plays, and not just Shakespeare. They would do Shaw and Sheridan and Charlie's Aunt and all kinds of things. And they went all around, and that they were still doing that when I met Shashi, who was their son-in-law. And I got the idea somehow of it would be interesting to do a film about a traveling theater company made up largely of Indian actors who would be traveling around India, putting on Western plays, not necessarily Shakespeare. And so I thought about that, and Ruth Javala, our writer, our screenwriter, she said, yes, a traveling company is interesting, but it shouldn't be Indian actors, because Indian actors, the kind of Indian actors, young Indian actors, or not just young, but who would go around India putting on plays, that just wouldn't happen in Indian life. I mean, actors are considered it's like a low class. They're called mirasi, which means this sort of vagabonds and stragglers and people who, you know, entertain and who are really not so okay. And that the kind of upper middle class educated Indians who wanted to act and do you know, any kind of modern plays that, for instance, were being seen in England or on Broadway, they would never, ever, ever take up the life of a Mirasi, sleeping on station platforms and scrounging food and all the rest of it. So I abandoned that idea, but she thought it would be a very interesting thing to make a film in a way based on the Kindle's troupe. But she had a different idea about it. I mean, the Kindles thought of their life as traveling actors in India as a triumph. Ruth saw it in its opposite, as not a triumph at all, and as it was a sort of metaphor for the fading away of English and European culture out of Indian life, Indian intellectual life, and fading away and being overtaken by many other concerns of modern Indians. And so she had a completely different take on it. So we made that film, Shakespeare Walla, and Shashi Kapoor was in it, and so was his wife, Jennifer. She had a small part, and his sister-in-law, Felicity, and the parents. And they went around putting on Shakespeare. Now, I never, ever, in all those, all the time I spent with them, I never actually saw one of their performances. It just, they never did it in the place where I was. And they tended to go all over India and to schools and to hill stations in the summer and wherever they thought that they could, there would be an audience, and there had been. Right after Indian independence, there was a big audience for Shakespeare, and that's why they thought of themselves as their life as a sort of triumph. But it was this was what was happening, something like that. So we made Shakespeare Walla, and we took this traveling company called the Buckinghams all around various places in northern India. And we showed their performances. And we picked 4 plays to do. Antony and Cleopatra, which is a tremendous favorite of mine, Hamlet, Othello, and Romeo and Juliet. Those are the 4 plays that we worked with. And so what we're going to see today is a big excerpt from Othello, and but in the story of Shakespeare Walla, the Indian, the young sort of playboy type, who's Shashi Kapoor, he's having an affair with an Indian movie star, and she sort of follows him around, and she's a big deal. I mean, she has all her fans, and she's a big deal, and. So she comes to where he is, and he's there where they're performing Othello, and she says, "Oh, I'd like to." Well, he's seen a bit of Hamlet, and he says, "Oh, it was so wonderful," and Mr. Kindle, or rather Mr. Buckingham, was such a great artist and all of this, and she said, "Well, take me. I'd like to see it," and so on. So he does, which is a big mistake, as you'll see. So that's what we're going to see. I want to say something a little bit about the style, or maybe I should say this later. If you may have some, but just a little bit about the style of acting, of Shakespearean acting in the film. To me, I mean, I'd never seen. How old was I then? I was 30 or something, 31. I had never seen that many Shakespeare plays except here in Ashland as a child, or as a teenager rather. That's the only Shakespeare I ever knew. And so I really didn't know what Shakespearean acting should be. I mean, I guess I probably saw some Shakespeare plays in New York, but I don't remember them at all. I'm sure I did. So I didn't know what Shakespearean acting should be, and so whatever the Kindles or the Buckingham players were doing sounded fine to me, and seemed great. And but it was in a style which really had kind of gone out of fashion. It was a sort of they learned their Shakespeare in the 30s, I suppose, and it was a kind of after or pre-Second World War way of acting Shakespeare. And to me, it was fine what we put in the film, and that was the way it ought to be, and I never ever questioned it. And even to this day, when I see, for instance, a performance of Othello, I cannot help but put it up against what Mr. Kendall did in Shakespeare Walla. It's either better or not as good. And that's the way I feel about it. I still to this day feel about it. And when I see great Shakespeare performances of any of these plays, and there's a whole new style of acting Shakespeare now and different ways of producing it and going, I'm always comparing it against my Shakespeare in my film. And I know that it's probably far less wonderful and all of that, but that's the way I look at it.
I'm directing Othello next season, and I'm terrified now about what you're gonna.
You beware. You beware. I will be there.
I've been warned. Should we see the clip?
Yeah.
Let's do it.
It is the cause, my soul. Let me not name it to you, you chaste stars. It is the cause. Yet I'll not shed her blood, nor scar that whiter skin of hers than snow, and smooth as monumental alabaster. Yet she must die. Or to betray more men. Put out the light. And then put out the light. If I quench thee, thou flaming minister, I can again thy former light restore. When you're quiet, we'll continue.
What's this? Shh.
Put out the light, and then put out the light. Oh, balmy breast that almost doth persuade justice to break her sword. Be thus when thou art dead, and I will kill thee and love thee afterward one more, and that the last. So sweet was ne'er so fatal, I must weep. But these are cruel tears. This sorrow's heavenly, it strikes where it doth lodge.
Who's there? Othello.
Aye, Desdemona.
Bandina. Will you come to bed, my lord? Give me my hand, please.
Have you prayed tonight, Desdemona?
Aye, my lord.
Go, Sanju.
If you bethink yourself of any sin unreconciled as yet to heaven and grace, solicit for its strain.
Alas, my lord, what might you mean by that?
Be brief. I will walk by. I would not kill thy unprepared spirit. No, heaven forfend, I would not kill thy soul.
Talk you of killing?
I don't.
Then heaven have mercy on me.
I say amen.
If you say so, I hope you will not kill me.
That handkerchief that I so loved and gave us thee, thou gavest to Cassio.
No, by my life and soul, send for the
the man and ask him.
Sweet soul, take heed of perjury, that on thy deathbed.
I but not yet to die.
Yes, presently. Therefore confess thee freely of thy sin, for to deny each article with oath cannot remove the strong infection I do groan withal. Thou art to die.
Then heaven have mercy on me.
I say amen.
And have you mercy, too. I never did offend you in my life. Never loved Cassio. But with such general warranty of heaven as I might love.
Down, strumpet!
Banish me,
Weep
Lord.
thou foil to my face! Down,
Kill me
strumpet!
tomorrow. Let me live tonight.
Nay, if you strive,
Half an hour.
because there is no pause!
Say
It
one
is too
prayer.
late! It is too late! Not yet. Not yet. Quite yet. I that am cruel, am yet merciful. I would not have thee linger in thy pain so.
I do beseech you that I may speak a word with you. Oh, good my lord.
Who's there? There's Amelia. By and by. Think she stirs again? No more moving. Still as the grave. Oh, insupportable, oh heavy hour.
Why don't we go?
Methinks there should be now a huge eclipse of sun and moon, and that the affrighted globe should yawn in alteration. I had forgotten. Come in, Amelia. Let me the curtains draw. Where art thou now? What's the matter with thee now?
Oh, my good lord. Yonder sun.
What now? With the very error of the moon, she comes more near the earth than she was wont.
May I have your autograph?
Will you please sign?
Young Venetian called Roderigo.
Roderigo killed and Cassio killed.
No, Cassio.
Not Cassio killed, then murdered out of tune, and sweet revenge grows harsh. Yeah.
I'm sorry, sir, for what has happened. Very sorry.
Let's call it a victory for the motion pictures over the theater.
It's bad. It should not have happened.
Oh, all sorts of things are happening all the time. It's just one of those things. It's not your fault. You can't help it. We get used to it. We've got to make the best of it.
It was such wonderful acting.
What the hell does it matter if the audience get out of hand and we can't hold them? It's our fault, not theirs. I shouldn't have lost my temper. I shouldn't have talked to them like that. It was wrong of me. I should have apologized. People don't seem to understand what a terrible nervous strain is playing a part like a fellow.
You're very good, sir. All of you are very good.
I should have apologized. I had no right to talk to them like that. It was unprofessional of me. Years ago, David Garrick did exactly what I did tonight, and he had to go down the following night on the stage on his knees in front of an audience full of drunken nincompoops and apologize publicly. David Garrick, mind you. Do you know who he was? The mama's lot.
Please let me apologize for the disturbance.
Excuse me.
How could you do that? Making a display of yourself, then leaving before the end.
But it must have been very near the end, Sanjuji. He killed the heroine. And what was it? How can you like something like that? All that moaning and groaning. So bloodthirsty. So badly acted.
I should have known you couldn't appreciate such a thing.
Just tell me.
Tell me why you had to bring that press photographer in the theater like that. I think it was all planned from the beginning.
I didn't bring him. Must have been the theater manager. What can I do if somebody wants to take my picture? Say no, no?
You think you can get away with a thing like this? Do you know how it made me feel sitting there with you? And Mr. Buckingham, how he felt?
For them, it's an honor if I stay even 5 minutes. The whole place was so dirty and shabby. When I came home at once, I asked Didi to get my bath ready. And the chair they gave me was broken. I'm sure it had bugs. Gee.
Oh, stupid. Stupid.
Yes, I'm stupid, and they're very clever with their dirty costumes and that cheap hall with all those cheap people.
All you know is your films.
Thank God. Do you think I want to be like them? Like your poor little English girl? Yes, yes, go to her. In her night dress. They have no shame, these women.
What are you saying?
Everyone knows what they're like, these English girls, and today I've seen with my own 2 eyes. Right there on the stage in front of everyone, in a night dress just like this one.
And what are you? A songstress. You're not fit to speak her name.
I am Manjula. Where I go, hundreds, thousands follow me.
Fantastic. Thank you. I'm so interested, as some of you in the audience know, I've really tried to devote my career to company, both at my former theater cornerstone, traveling around this country, and here at the Oregon Shakespeare Festival. And Jim, you talked about being inspired by that company in India at the time, and you have worked with many artists repeat times throughout your career. And Matías, you have talked as well about the importance of the actors that you work with and continuing to work with the same group. So what do you each think you gain as an artist by a commitment to company or working with the same artists over time?
Well, it was in India. There was a necessity because we were making English language films, and we had to have actors who were at home. Who basically they were probably always most of them were speaking either Hindustani or Bengali maybe. They had to be able to act naturally and fluently in English. And there weren't that many people who could do that. And so when we would find people like that who were equally good in their own language and because all our Indian films have patches of Indian languages in them, when they were at home with in both languages, then that would be a valuable person. And so we built up a little sort of troupe in time, and we could go back to them again and again and bring them in to play different kinds of roles. But later in life, sometimes I would see an actor doing something in one of my films, and I would think about that person. Well, he could be the most appalling villain, someone who's charming and you know, as for instance in Morris. There was a scene in Morris when James Wilby mistreats one of his sisters, and he's really nasty. And I thought when I was making it, when I was watching the film and watching the rushes, I thought James Wilby could be a really wonderful villainous sort of stupid guy, and which he is in Howards End. As someone yesterday said in the audience, he reminded him of young Trump. And so people who are valuable to you in one way may be very valuable in another, and they get to do a completely different thing. And we have an actor that in all our English films, Patrick Godfrey, who is a Shakespearean actor also, and he's in each of our English films he plays a villainous character, a really terrible person and hateful. But he's the nicest guy in the world, and I'm sure would be a very sympathetic kind of character. In fact, I used him in a Coca-Cola commercial. I once made a Coca-Cola commercial, which was King Lear in 1 minute. And so it was King Lear in 1 minute. And it's the famous scene when the sisters have to choose what they would give or bring to their father. And he was King Lear, and he was a wonderful King Lear. It's just everything you'd want. And he ends up getting a bottle of Coca-Cola. So it's everybody can be, everyone has, they're useful. I mean, that's an awful thing to say, but in fact, it is true in show business.
Yeah, and for me, there's something about confidence and code. No, there's going back to the people that I go back to. I feel that working only in one film, the experience hasn't been exhausted yet. No, yeah, the relationship hasn't been exhausted only in one film. That's why I also keep on making the Shakespeare films. I don't think that when doing one Shakespeare film, I exhaust the relationship that I can have with that material. So that's why I keep on going back to it. And yeah, there's something that the pleasure, growing up together, film after film, learning about each other, learning that we suddenly can do something different. As Jim has just mentioned, this idea that someone that is doing like a villain then can do like a very humble person, and maybe because we enjoyed what masks do. No, the possibility of masks, that you can take out a mask, put another one, and somehow from film to film, you are capable of doing that, of enjoying the game of masks. And that's why I keep on. And I do believe that there is so much more to explore with them. Yeah.
Beautiful. Jim, what do you think are the unique qualities that have made Merchant Ivory films so respected and so popular?
Well, I think it starts with the producer and the writer just as much as it does with me, I have to say. I mean, we had an extraordinary producer who always believed in what we wanted to do, Ruth and I, and he made sure that we did it. And one of the reasons Richard II hasn't been made yet is it would have been made 5 years ago if Ismail was still alive. He just was a tremendous producer who really produced. And then I've been very, very lucky with my writer, with Ruth Jamvala, who's written most of the scripts of my features. Well, not all of them, but most of them. It's a wonderful thing to have a screenwriter who is herself a master fiction writer, a novelist and short story writer, and who's really just was first class. And to have someone like that, to be able to work with someone like that, it focuses. Well, it focused me, goodness knows, and I'm sure Ismail. So those were, I mean, it really was a three-legged stool kind of thing. I mean, we were all important, and that's why we've survived for so long, and we did so many different things in different places. I think it was really as much Ruth and Ismail as me. Sometimes more, actually, Ismail than me, because he wanted to do certain kinds of things. I remember at one point, I was on the point of abandoning A Room with a View to make a contemporary film, because I had gotten really tired of doing, I said and I thought, and it was true, I'd gotten tired of doing period films and all the stuff that goes with it. Cars that won't run and weird hats and all sorts of things. I was just tired of it. But so I wanted to do a contemporary film, but he had already gotten the rights to do A Room with a View, and Ruth had written the script, and he said, "We're making A Room with a View." So his point of view also had a lot of weight.
How would you and Ruth collaborate in terms of creating a screenplay? How iterative was the process? How collaborative? Or how much would she just kind of do her thing?
Well, it depended whether she was writing it on her, writing it alone herself, without me, or if we were writing it together. On some screenplays, we collaborated and wrote it together. But largely, she would, I'd find something I wanted to do. And originally we did a whole series of films which were contemporary films and were original screenplays. And those came out of a lot of conversations. And then at a certain point when she felt she had enough, and it came out of a lot of letter writing because she would be in Delhi and I was in New York, and there were hundreds and hundreds of letters that went back and forth about those first 4 films that we made. Should it be this or that, and this character, that character, where, and all this kind of thing. And there was this kind of long discussion, mostly by mail. And so she would then at a certain point sit down and get to work on it. And if it was a novel, I would have read the novel. Sometimes she suggested a novel to me, which I didn't, or an author which I didn't know. Sometimes I found something I wanted to do, and we'd talk about it. And I would take my novel and mark it all up and say, I must have this, and this is great, and fantastic scene I'd write and stuff like that with exclamation points and stuff. And then she'd write the script, and then the script would come, and some of those things weren't there. And then I would shout and stamp my foot and say, you've ruined everything, and this is, I don't want to do it, and I'm not doing it, and all this kind of thing. So there was that kind of thing, but she would calmly maintain her composure and laughing all the time. And that's how we worked on the adaptations, but where she worked alone. But if we were working together, she always wanted me to write my version of the screenplay first. Just let me. She said, you write a screenplay and then give it to me. So that's what I would do, and I would write the whole screenplay out. I'd never show her anything until it was finished, as she never showed me anything either while she was writing any kind of screenplay. I never got it in bits and pieces, always at the end. And so so I would give her my screenplay that I'd written, and then she would base her screenplay on my screenplay. And she would either throw stuff out that, or she would add things of her own. She would invent constantly. She was very, very inventive. And we would work that way. And seemed to work pretty well.
This question of contemporary versus period work, seeing so many of your films being transported to another time and place, it's so powerful. And at the same time, when I direct Shakespeare, I tend to be attracted to contemporary settings as a director. All your films that I've seen have been contemporary. Have you ever been attracted to a period setting? Can you imagine doing work in a period?
At first, no. And there is something that, having seen Shakespeare well and watching it here again, how I enjoyed this, how the play is inside of the film. This sort of, I think that I feel very comfortable with this sort of like Russian dolls structure, where the thing can be photographed, can be included, and participate in another sort of relationship with the other lines that I also present. So I feel that I am attracted to, in order to keep it as it is, or as it is, as I see it in the paper, in the book, I rather isolate it and make a Russian doll of it and put like other ones inside. That would be the contemporary. That it would be contemporary times. So I'm always having in my films characters that are actors or directors. It's always, there's always a context in which I can put this little bubble. So I don't need to transform everything to make it look as if it's natural. I actually like the artifice of theater. So I like to experience it. That's what I like when I go to theater, and that's why I enjoy this somehow structure in my films that I somehow see. I appreciate it in Shakespeare well, that you have these parallel lines and every line breathes by itself, and I enjoy that. But who knows? Maybe also one can get tired of making all the time like a same line, a same path, and maybe one day I'll say I would like to. But then I feel that it must be a very different way of filmmaking. No, you must be very talented for that. Also, it must be very different. It's not because I work with Shakespeare that I would be able to do any sort of approximation to the material. I feel that I'm limited, as everybody in a way, and that's why I try to offer what I can do somehow, and now I can do. Others will do other things because that would be what they connect with.
Can you imagine directing somebody else's writing instead of your own writing?
Yes, I can. Yes, that would be actually for me. My experience in cinema has been very. I don't know if the word is social, but I need somebody else. I cannot work by myself, even though I work in very small crews. It's a super low budgeted, independent. I always need someone, and especially and that's why I like actors and my DP and so on. And now everything's about dialogue, being in dialogue with somebody else, or with Shakespeare. I'm in dialogue with the play, and that's how things move. It's not only me that I produce something. And even in script writing, even if I'm writing by myself, I need somebody else to talk to about it. No, and even if it's with drinks, and if it's I need that my thoughts somehow are expressed orally and like somehow exposed to somebody else. And I usually choose that person. It's not like I talk to everybody. No, it's not that but suddenly there's like one friend or one or two friends or even the producer, no, and I talk and the thing gets, so maybe it would be interesting for me to work with a scriptwriter, no, in the sense that that would be, that sort of dialogue would be the main issue.
I cannot solve problems as a director by myself. I can't do. I need.
You're not supposed
that
to.
social,
Yeah.
right?
Why should you?
I'll remember that next time I'm beating myself up. Look, with your profanations and your adaptations of the Forster novels and so many others, you obviously come from different places aesthetically in terms of adaptation. But I'm curious to hear either of you or both of you talk about questions of responsibility when you're adapting to the source, to the original author. Do you feel the weight of that responsibility? How do you feel freedom, and how do you feel the weight of the responsibility to be faithful to that source?
I think you do have a responsibility. Otherwise, why adapt that particular book or author? If you don't love what that author has to say and has written, why get involved in it? Get involved in something else that you do love. I mean, I would never. I mean, you go away from things and you make all kinds of choices, which basically is to help you carry the voice of that author further into a new place, which is the movies, but you don't turn him on his head. And I love with certain writers their tone of voice, and I think that tone of voice somehow ought to be in the film. There's all kinds of ways of getting that. It's not. Or you find it, or it finds you. I don't know. I mean, but I think it's wrong to just throw out something.
I love you saying the tone of voice, because one of the things that I so admired about the work of yours I've seen is that there may not be as much Shakespeare text as you would think in an adaptation, but I feel like the tone of the Shakespeare play is alive and well in what you've created. So what are your thoughts about that?
I think that's true of any kind of adaptation.
Any good adaptation?
Well, yeah, I mean, Ruth always said that if you have 10 fabulous lines of dialogue, you throw away 7 of them, and you have 3, and that's all you need. And of course, you may add some of your own, but you can't hang on every single word forever.
For me, it's I once I like Orson Welles adaptations of Shakespeare, and I was watching them and and with the text, and I saw the work that he did on the text, and he was the word may seem a little bit violent, but he was butchering the text. Like, he was cutting so much that I was shocked. No, I would go and see the film. Amazing, perfect, this fidelity, and then you go and compare, and it's so much is being cut away from the text, but nothing is transformed. No, he just eliminates. As you said, you have 10, you can eliminate 7, and then you can add some things. You can move it around. But something for me was very surprising: the freedom with which he handled the text, but at the same time how he kept the things as they were at the same time. Very strange dialectic in a way, and somehow that liberated me from idea of having a wrong sense of responsibility. That I think that it's also what James is mentioning, that but another way of responsibility that has to do with tone, it has to do with the pleasure of why are you doing that. It's not that if I'm working with 1290, it's because there's something there that is touching me, and that I try to communicate and to circulate, to put into circulation. So it's not that I want to transform, but just to make into circulation. But in that sense, I shouldn't be feeling chained, as if I would know how to absolutely transform it, but somehow try to put in motion. Somehow, but also I have this one little detail that is translation. No, that is no, that is a very little detail. But I enjoy it.
Are you working with existent Spanish language translations? Or
yes, and then I do my own things too. And and I think that I keep on making these films because I want to get better at. And now sometimes I listen to my first attempts towards Shakespeare, and I would do it differently. There's a verse in 12th Night that she's talking about the cabin, the willow cabin.
Make me a willow cabin.
Yeah, and I think that in what I translated, it doesn't feel as you can take that line as a prison. That the character is talking that as a place of prison, and in my translation that doesn't appear. So I say, it's a little bit more easy in what I translated. It's a more romantic in a way, instead of this darker side. So that's why I keep on making them. But I like that exactly from translating, the art of translating, that it's you always in the act of translating yours is just a version. Yours is just like one pebble of sand, and it's not replacing the play. It's adding an option. Somehow it's multiplicating the possibilities of the source that you love. So that's why I keep on. I enjoy translating. Even though it hurts, but that's okay. You win something. You lose and you win. No?
Jim, do you, Matías talked about Orson Welles. What are some of your favorite Shakespeare adaptations to cinema?
Well, the Orson Welles one, I love them. I mean, every one. And though actually, I haven't seen the Macbeth in a long time. But no, I love them. But you know, some of the film adaptations I've seen, there've been all kinds of them.
There sure have.
Huh?
Yeah, many.
Yeah, many. I mean, starting out with Laurence Olivier's Henry V, which I saw when I was in college, and you know, I mean, that's. And just offhand, I mean, I can't pull them out like that and say, but there've been plenty that I've enjoyed and liked very much. I thought that Ray Fiennes did a wonderful version of Coriolanus. Yeah, I thought that was terrific what he did.
Yes.
And I think he's doing another one now.
Is he?
I think so. Yeah.
Interesting. Awesome. Why don't you, speaking of Shakespeare adaptations, I was so honored that you saw the Richard II that I directed last year here in Ashland, and I'm very curious I know you've adapted the screenplay already, correct? You've adapted it into a screenplay.
Yep.
So if you can give us any hints about how you're approaching the material, how you will direct it, just anything, and what draws you to that play as a fellow lover
I'm
of the
asked
play?
that question a million times. I never come up with a good answer. I never.
Today
I've
is the
never,
day.
ever been
Today is the
ever-
day. To
Yeah,
have
but
the good
you're
answer.
not a financier. You know? So I never. It's hard for me to, articulate all the different reasons. It just appeals to me like anything. I just like it very much, and I've always liked it. When I took Shakespeare in college, it was at the University of Oregon, like 100 years ago practically. But the teacher never got past Richard II and the two parts of Henry IV. We spent the whole year on those three plays, and I think that infected me in some kind of way, and I never got beyond it, and I had no further interest. But I really, so I can't really give you all the reasons, but if I were to make that film, and my idea about making that film was to do it absolutely in, I mean, the story takes place in 1399 and 1400, 1399 really. I would have it absolutely so medieval, you wouldn't believe it. And I also want to make it in 3D. And this is so shocking when I put that idea forward to people. But I think a 3D version, a 3D medieval version with wonderful actors would just be a fabulous thing. But it's very hard to convince people of that. I mean, so
How many people in this room want to see this film?
So
How many people are going to write checks today? Come on! Matthias, when we had the pleasure of having dinner together, all three of us on Friday night, you told a story about a transformative experience watching one of Jim's films,
Yeah,
and I
so
wonder
to
if
go to
you're willing to share that.
Yeah, I am from Argentina. I grew up in Buenos Aires, and when I was young, my mother took me to the cinema a lot, and that's how I started being interested in cinema, through watching, and of course, and I went to see all the films that showed in my theater in my neighborhood. And James Ivory's films were always there. You have it, and so I have all these memories from watching your films. And there's one especially that was very personal because it had to do with my coming out and my bringing myself up. Also, that had to do with A Soldier Dodges Never Cries, and there is a character like a young boy, like a young queer boy, that is very free and very moving and very exciting, and for me, that I was just a young boy that didn't know how to manage my feelings and my desires and so on. It was very challenging to be sitting next to my mother while watching the film. It was a very hard experience for me. It was very. I may have had like a tough time watching it, but it was because I couldn't know what to do and I was feeling bad. But at the same time, it remained as something important, no? Like an idea of facing, an idea of embracing even these situations that put you in an unsafe position. And somehow I think that it helped. It helped.
I'm glad.
You know, because we were next to each other while watching, and we developed a bond from it. So I always have that
That's
film
wonderful. I mean,
in my
that's
mind.
I'm sure a rare thing.
My biography. Yeah.
Beautiful.
That boy has gone on to become a big star at the Metropolitan Opera. Anthony Roth Costanzo. He's a countertenor, and he's a real star.
I love that. I just have a final question this morning, and then we'll open it up to all of you. Listening to you talk in the past, the theme of time came up, and how you each explore time in your work. And you know, maybe for me right now, having elderly parents and a son who's a teenager who's facing college, the theme of time and how we deal with time as artists is heavier in my heart and more active in my heart, I think, than ever before in my life. And so I would love to hear either of you say anything about how you think about time in relation to your own work. It's an open-ended question.
My films move fast somehow, and so but still then they're a couple and they accumulate. And again, I think that it's not innocent that I'm making these films with the same people, the same group, with these strange measures like 40 minutes, 60 minutes, 80 minutes, and somehow maybe the work would be the whole cycle and not only just one individual film, because it's in between these different films that you sense this energy of people growing up together and this feeling of time. Then individually in each film you have ideas or maybe especially more in the last one, in Hermia and Helena, with this coming back and forth to countries, to cities, to different times. But yeah, it's in terms of narrative also, it has this like this emotional value, no? That time goes by, people are the same, but they change, and somehow in the scenes you see that. When I see James Ivory's films, I see that, I sense that that time doesn't go innocently. No? And characters change, even though the facade may be similar, or the appearances may be the same, but there's something inside that has moved, and that you capture in a close-up, and it had to do with time. Also with varying with characters. There's something that I would like to develop in future projects, that this idea of in order to reach to this last scene, you need to go through all these other scenes. You cannot move that fast. I tend to move fast, and I realize that another way to touch certain other nerves or emotional points, it's this idea of accumulation. No, because you need for that close up to work, you need to accumulate. No, you need time. So that's also like it has this emotional value.
I don't know about time. I think about time in terms of myself, really, and I'm amazed that I'm even sitting here today. I'm pretty old now, and somehow I got myself out here, but I think about time in terms of the generations moving on, and I'm a member of a certain generation. There's hardly anybody left, and many of the people that I've worked with we started out when we were young, and they're gone, and but they've left something. They've left something there, which is and it's in my films, and I'm grateful to them, and glad I had the sense to preserve what they did, and do still, some of them. But I'm not so articulate on this as you. I mean, I probably haven't thought about it as deeply.
I thought that was a beautiful response. Actually.
Well.
I'd love to open it up to anything anyone wants to ask either of these extraordinary artists. Please.
I'm wondering if you would talk. Oh, thanks. Thank you very much for being here today. And I was wondering if you would talk a little bit about the visual translation of the work, certainly into a screenplay in words, but also, since you're both making cinematic work, what's your bridge from a novel or a play into the visual expression of the piece? If there's a certain process, or do you go to paintings of a time or something, or so sort of how does it happen for you? If there's, we should both talk about that, please.
Well, okay. For me, more and more. Well, I'm only in a way realizing this now. It seems crazy to only kind of really think this, but how important the location is. to any film. Where and how you shoot a film in a particular place, in a particular weather, at a certain time of day, in a particular room, or even parts of a room, how that shapes everything you do, and how it shapes what the actors do. We always work on locations. We almost never have worked in a studio. Occasionally we had to do a studio set because there was no other way of doing it. But on the whole, we've always just found our locations. And the actors then have to manage. If I say, hey, here's the room and there's the door, there's certain windows and certain pieces of furniture, they just have to manage. And they do. And it gives a sort of tremendous framework to what you're doing. I mean, in fact, it decreases, not decreases exactly, but your job is half solved by your location. And of course, the location can also be visually a marvelous thing. It can, it could be, particularly in terms of weather, it can be an extraordinary addition to what you're doing. But that's how I think. I mean, that has the most profound effect on what I've done. And yes, I mean, I am interested in certain periods and how it must have looked then and so on. But on the whole, it's where you work.
And for me, it has also a lot to do with the performers, the actors, and their voices. So I feel that I like their performances, so I want to capture that. So the translation, the cinematic element would be to try to convey that. And what I do is, instead of having a shot, like a frame, a shot that will make you think that Maria Villar is Rosalinda, I rather know that that the person that you're seeing is Rosalinda. I rather you see an actress performing Rosalinda. So I like these layers, that you see, and I think that if the shot captures that is something that cinema gives. That you won't be that won't be written, that won't be like theater. It's something that cinema is doing, and that has to be with documenting an actor perform, and capture that, And so for me, if there's a translation of the word, is that the act of playing, and trying to document that.
Matthias, 15 years ago, a film came out of Brazil that was earth-shaking in terms of American cinema circles, and that film was Morales, City of God. You were young in South America at the time. Yeah. Can you talk about how that affected and what was going on in terms of the way cinema in South America, in Argentina, developed subsequently?
Yeah. City of God, it's a big film. It's a big film, and that reached like international recognition, and it provided like a highway for those sort of film productions. Somehow exporting an image of an international image in a way. So we have similar films in Argentina, that would move in that way. For instance, one that was premiered not that long ago here, that's a Wild Tales, for instance. This idea of bringing some sociological investigations into a film and building characters out of that and making In that sense, I do believe I'm doing something different. Mine is I feel somehow that these are like operas in a way, and I'm doing like chamber music, So I have like 3 instruments, and we're in a room, and we have an audience, and we play and we try these things, and so in one sense, by watching films that are these highways that I can like, or it helped me to polish the work of these 3 instruments, of enjoying the music of fewer instruments in a way.
Yes, please.
I would love to ask James, what drew you so strongly to E.M. Forster? I loved E.M. Forster from a very early age and wrote to him when I was 16, and he replied from King's College, Cambridge. And, you know, I still have that postcard. And I loved seeing the shots of King's College, Cambridge in Morris, which I saw just the other night and enjoyed so much. But so many of your films have been based on his work, and I'd love to know whether you knew him personally and what drew you to his novels.
I almost knew him personally. And I too have a letter I kept. I was, he and I had a mutual friend in New York who was an Indian at the United Nations, who I came to know, and I was on my way to London, and from there I was going on to India, and I wondered whether he was always talking about Morgan this and Morgan that, and so I said, would it be possible to meet Morgan? And he wrote to him, and I got a letter from Forster saying to come and see him at King's College, and so I set out. When I was staying with friends in London, I went down, and then there was a telegram from him saying, "Please don't come. I'm not feeling well," and so I never met him. I don't know what we would have talked about. And poor man to have to sit with some callow filmmaker. Well, I was very callow, and I don't know what we would have talked about, and I'm sure I would have bored him, but. So that's not really answering your question, but I thought I too have a holy letter like that. But it's just his tone, and it is so sharp in terms of his viewing of English life, but there's also a great deal of humor in it and wit. But as his humanity is there, and just the way he writes is so, so engaging and so intelligent, and all these things. And then I like the stories and the characters, obviously, or I wouldn't have made the movies. But again, you're asking me to. I'm not very good at articulating these kinds of things, or coming up with a very good answer. But it was just him. I liked him.
How about over here?
So I was admiring the cinematography in Shakespeare Walla, and I'm wondering how deeply you get involved in those decisions of the framing and the lighting and the blocking of the shots.
Well, I get involved in the blocking of the shot a lot, but that's something you do with the cameraman. And the cameraman has certain requirements, really always having to do with light and the movement of the camera, how the camera can move. And as I say, we always worked in a location, and some of our locations were very tiny, so you were very limited in what you could do. But I've always believed in leaving the. Generally, I would tell the cameraman what it is I want to see, and he would know that anyway. And I've never believed in getting up there at the camera and doing this and finding my own frame. I think that's wrong. A good cameraman, or any cameraman, is an artist, and he has to be able to decide what is the frame, or should be. It's wrong to mess about, I think. But I've always worked with my cameraman, and very, very closely. And the cameraman of that film was Subrata Mitra, who was Satyajit Ray's cameraman, and we made 4 films with him. I wished. He never worked outside India, so I never was able to work with him again. But he was a terrific guy.
I wondered if you could address the issue of those of us who I know you've done a beautiful job in interweaving a play and a film, but there's some things that I'm grappling with the idea of whether something is a better idea for a film than a play, vice versa. Can you address the issue of where sometimes you start in a film, it doesn't work, but it might work as a play, or vice versa?
That's never really happened to me. I've never been involved like that. I mean, it's either been an original idea or an original idea for film, or it's come from a story or a novel. Or once it came from a poem. I made a film based on a poem once, The Wild Party. Have you ever seen that? Anybody in the room seen The Wild Party? Oh, wow. 3 people, that's good. So, it had Raquel Welch in it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very hard question. Again, I think I'll go back to this idea of, I did a play, that little play in 2010, and I enjoyed the experience a lot. This idea of meeting every week, the possibility of changing, the possibility of getting back to rehearsal and changing this, that, the thrill of the performance and being there, I felt that it was like planning a whole shot, like an hour-long take. For me, was that my feeling was that I was handling but then that because I come from cinema, but then when we finished doing the play, I couldn't bear the idea that it was over, that it evaporated, and I realized that I was a filmmaker, that I needed that. For me, there's something about, again, this idea of encapsulating and making these bubbles, these visual bubbles and sounds, and documenting these encounters, and that I need that I need to keep something. I don't know what it is, but I realized that even though I learned a lot from the theater experience, and I would go back to it, and I enjoyed it much, but that I'm mainly a filmmaker, because for me the idea that doesn't, because if you do it next week, it's okay. I like it, but there's a moment that there won't be next week. So I have this, so I don't debate much. Then I try to make the better film I can, and so in that sense I get further away from the possibility of this being like a play or something else. I'm trying to make this as a film, but I do realize I do think about this difference and how I tend more to one than to the other.
I can say something about that a little bit. I've never directed a stage play, but I once directed an opera, and we had all these rehearsals and final rehearsal, and I kept thinking, why are they always facing towards the audience? Why can't they face? They're singing to each other. Why can't someone stand with the back to the audience? What is this? And this is very irritating for me. And then if someone had to lead me aside and said, Jim, the singers in an opera, they have to face the audience. There's no other way of doing it. And this kind of put me off. And as a filmmaker, I didn't want something so unnatural. So I suppose that's one of the reasons I never ever did it again.
I'm just going to add a quick comment on this topic. I find that I am more and more attracted as a theater director to plays that have impossible transitions that feel cinematic. And in a funny way, to me, it goes back to Shakespeare, because you just jump cut from scene to scene sometimes. And I think Shakespeare plays are actually very cinematic. And there's something like Robert Schenkken's All the Way, where it's just the scenes are changing constantly. How do you solve that as an artist? So there you go.
Good. Well, good morning, and thanks to all three of you for an extraordinary experience this morning. It's been really delightful to share the morning with you. I wanted to ask James, you must have an abundance of correspondence. You mentioned your correspondence with Ruth. Are you going to collect all of that historical wonderfulness in some way and publish it or have a collection
Well,
with the
it has been
university?
collected in the sense that the University of Oregon has all my stuff, and it has all of Ruth's film stuff, and it has a lot of Ismail's stuff. Ismail was not someone who really thought about that very much, so I'm only now finding things and sending it off. But there's hundreds and hundreds of letters and things like that, and all kinds of people. I mean, it's in a collection at the University of Oregon, and anybody can go and see it.
That's great.
Some of it's online.
Mr. Ivory, I read in a local paper, the Daily Tidings, that you once considered making a film near Klamath Lake.
The Lake of the Woods.
Lake of the Woods.
Right.
And I just wondered if you might share what some of your ideas were for that film.
Well, it was to be based on a short story that Ruth Jabvala wrote called "How I Became a Holy Mother," and it was about a young American girl who was besotted with all kinds of thoughts of Indian spiritualism and all of that, and she and another group of people were at this sort of lake-like place somewhere in the United States, and they founded a kind of ashram. And it's a very funny story, a nice story, and I thought that would make a very good film. And so we were planning to try to raise money for it to make it at Lake of the Woods, and she wrote a screenplay, and we could never get financing for it. But the financing that we didn't get for that went into another film which we made, which was Rosalinda, which was set in a ballroom in New York City. So it sort of worked out in a way, but we never got to make the film at Lake of the Woods.
Yeah. 2 more questions, I've been told.
When did you guys know that you wanted to do cinema, like you wanted to make movies?
It was by going to see movies, going to the theater, to the movie theater, that I was interested in film. At first I thought that I was going to be interested in film criticism and writing about film. But then it was very... I started doing some videos as history assignments in high school. Instead of writing like essays, the professor let us make like little films. So at first, when I was 15, I didn't want to be in front of the camera, so I just had the camera and did the thing, and I enjoyed it. And then next year, again, we instead of writing a paper, we did a little bit, and this time I was a little bit more ambitious, and I wrote a script, and then the other year again, and so it was something that it started happening. And then I went to film school. That is something that many people do now, and for some years now. It started happening, and this. But I do believe that there is something about the act of watching that I enjoy much, that pulls me to make my own images and sounds.
Yeah, I'm sure that was my case too. I mean, as a child and growing up in Klamath Falls, and we had 5 theaters, and I just went to everything. And somewhere along the way, well, I'm of the generation of Gone with the Wind and films like that. Somewhere along the way, I just decided I wanted to be a set designer. And and an architect friend in Klamath Falls who I got up the nerve to ask him to become a set designer, what should I do? And he said, go to architecture school. So I said, okay. So I went to the University of Oregon Architecture School, and I took architecture for 3 years. And ultimately, I ended up at the USC Film School. But I didn't know what a producer or a director was. I knew what actors were, And I hardly knew what a set designer was. I had no idea of these various roles in films, and I didn't think of myself as a filmmaker until I got to USC, and then they wanted me, no. What happened is I went to Venice. On my first trip to Europe, I went to Venice, and I was so excited by that city and so thrilled by it. And when I went back to USC, I was thinking, how can I get back to Venice? I had no, I had no plan. I didn't know what I would do. And, but I had to write a thesis. I was getting a master's. I had to write a thesis. So I said, well, what if I went to Venice and made a film about Venice? And they said, well, I guess you could. No one's ever done it, but you might have. Maybe, why not? And that's what I did. And that's how I became a filmmaker.
So one final question, if anybody has one. I see a hand. You pick.
Where's that film now?
Huh?
Where's that film now? Where's the Venice?
You can get it.
Yeah?
It's out. It's on the. Well, it was a Criterion film. It's now owned by Cone Media, but it's they haven't restored it yet, but they'll get to it eventually. Not in my lifetime, I'm sure.
At the beginning, you were talking about intelligent female characters and how, like, the difference between intelligent women who are using their intelligence in the comedies and how that drew you to the comedies. But what do you think the details within the Shakespeare are that delineate those different types of female characters, and how do you both of you, how do you use them within your adaptations or what was the word you used?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yes.
I think for me it was a surprise to find these women in the comedies. No, I was working on another film, my second feature, and I decided to have a companion readings, like that would have nothing to do with what I was at that moment working on. And it was then when I decided to read all Shakespeare that I haven't read. I have read some things, but not very specifically. And then I also decided to read like a Mexican-Peruvian writer that it's called Mario Velatin. So I was reading these two things, very different from each other, like extremely different. And then I was shocked by As You Like It, no? And then I started like, I read everything, but then I focused much more in the comedies and like started to find these women, and that's why the films are all called have the title of their names, because I like this sort of a group, this band, no, this that somehow establishes, and then is this connection with the actresses. So for me, it was very particular why I work with this. And then I think that there's some, even with the actresses that I work with, not every one of them are working with Shakespeare, with the Shakespeare lines. They has to have something to do with their personality and their that they enjoyed working these lines. They enjoyed saying these lines. And not all of the actors that I work with do that. So to those that I see that they don't enjoy it much, I give them other roles. I don't give them the Shakespeare lines. Because I do feel that there's a sort of excitement, even like a sort of an arousal in saying these lines, and I like photographing that. I see how they enjoy doing that, how they have fun in doing them, and that's what I go with somehow. So it's not me trying to put them to say this, but I think that in that laughter there is an idea of intelligence also.
Anything you want to add, Jim, on female characters?
No. Well, I've had a very smart woman author, and naturally her characters would tend to be smart, and
that's for sure. Can everybody join me in thanking these two amazing artists?
Yeah.